Big edition in the Penn State football class of 2024. I'm Thomas Frank Carr here on Blue White Illustrated's YouTube channel. Sean Fitz with me to break down the latest Penn State football commitment. So Fitz, how you doing today, and where are we going to find the next Nittany Lion?
We are going to Ohio, a place that Penn State has gone to before for quarterbacks, and they've brought in another one. Ethan Grunkemeyer is Penn State's quarterback in the class of 2024. We'll leave the book a little bit open to see if he's the only one in the class of 2024, but he is the first one to hop on board. Did so Saturday afternoon while on campus. He's going to throw out the Elite 11 tomorrow, so hopefully we get some more film, get some more looks at him and things of that nature. But yes, Penn State has a quarterback in the class of 2024. It's not Michael Van Buren. He's set to announce later today. Looks like Oregon's the pick there, but it's it's interesting to watch this process play out. Mike Yurcich went out on the road, and still thinking two quarterbacks, but Mike Yurcich went out on the road to look at guys, see firsthand. He's not going to offer a quarterback without seeing him in person. Grunkemeyer was the first one that he offered this spring, back in April. Of course, he's familiar with his trainer, Brad Maendler, from Drew Allar. He trusts his word, and Grunkemeyer's been at camp. He's been around the program a few times, and he pulled the trigger on the offer. Since then, a couple more offers have gone out, but Grunkemeyer always kind of seemed like the most realistic, kind of the closest. Of course, Miles O'Neill was offered late this week as well up in Massachusetts, so another regional offer. But this one makes a lot of sense. He came in for an unofficial visit last weekend, back in town this weekend, and now on the Nittany Lions commitment list.
So this is a guy that Penn State offered a month ago, if you're watching this on Saturday, a month ago today, and now is the first quarterback in the class of 2024. How would you describe where Grunkemeyer fits in kind of the quarterback conversation as a whole? Because I think fans are going to look at it this one way, and we'll get into the film review and what we think of Grunkemeyer in a minute. That it probably is different than that, but four-star Michael Van Buren goes to Oregon in this conversation, and Grunkemeyer, a three-star, the Penn State Nittany Lions pick up. So is he a rising prospect? Is this a guy that teams across the country are starting to kind of key in on, or is this Penn State settling? And I hate to use that word, but that's how some people are going to view this. So what's your assessment of that?
No, I think he's rising. He moved up in the On3 rankings a little bit last week. We talked to Charles Power about that. That'll be on the site when you check that out. Number 23 quarterback nationally, number 13 in Ohio, the highest three-star that you can get. So he's a guy that's certainly in the conversation for that four-star. He was at the Under Armour camp in Ohio, had a really good showing there. So I think you're looking at this as a stream of evaluations. Of course, Penn State offered Michael Van Buren as a freshman. They did not offer Ethan Grunkemeyer till last month. So there are different timelines that go with it. But let's be honest, these evaluations are an ongoing thing. The guys that you offer in the first place may not be the guys when you come around a couple of years later. And I think that's what you're seeing, not only with Grunkemeyer, but I mean, I like Ethan Cherry a lot. Miles O'Neill, there's a lot of talent, a lot of arm talent there. So there are still guys to be found. And again, it's an ongoing evaluation. So I think that's where you go with it. You don't want to get stuck on saying that plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever. Obviously I think plan A, number one, aside, we're not even talking Van Buren here, but Luke Kromenhoek was the guy that Mike Yurcich circled as his guy in this class. He's committed to Florida State. Does not look like he's budging from his commitment to Florida State. So this one kind of makes a lot of sense in terms of going out there, seeing what you like. And Yurcich is not one to be, swayed by site rankings, swayed by any of that outside noise. He's not really swayed by noise on the Penn State coaching staff. Sometimes he goes out and he does his own thing. So I think that's when you take a look at his evaluations, that's kind of, it falls along the line of what he does. Everyone's going to make the Drew Allar comparison because it's an Ohio kid. Yurcich went out and he was the first big offer. I know Minnesota was out in front of him, and there was a couple other schools that had offered, but Penn State, the first big offer for Grunkemeyer. It's tough to make that comparison because they are two different prospects. Drew's obviously a bigger body, more statuesque pro style guy. Grunkemeyer 6'2", 190. There's a frame to work with, but it's not the same. It's also not the same as Van Buren's sub 6 foot frame. So, you've got things that you can, put in one pile, check one box, whatever. But Grunkemeyer does a lot of really nice things on film. And really that's what you're going to come away thinking about. And in a couple of years, I mean, who knows what, or if it matters when somebody was offered, but Penn State didn't have an offer for Will Levis until he camped for them, which would have been a month from now. So during his recruiting cycle. So all these different things fall into place, and Grunkemeyer is a pretty good player.
Let's talk about some of his tools here quickly, because I think that they're very interesting when you watch the film, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But according to the Olentangy page, his profile page, this is some old data, but this gives us a general assessment of where he is as a quarterback. You mentioned 6'2", but he does have good hand size. I think that this has probably been updated since then, but almost 10-inch hands. That's another thing that you're looking for in a quarterback. Growth potential, all those things. The arm strength, you see it on film, and this is very interesting. You see average velocity, Wilson connected QB data. I dug into that a little bit. They literally put a chip in the football, and then I think they calculate spin rate and velocity on all those things. You can see they're 48.2. So we're not taking that as a hard measurement here. Because that can also update since they tested that, but also should give you a ballpark that you mentioned the comparison to Drew Allar and to his frame and his tools and all those things. They're not the same player, but I do think they share in certain aspects good arm strength. Grunkemeyer has a really good arm, and there's a lot of stuff that we can get into that. When it comes to Brad Maendler and that relationship with the Penn State coaching staff, is that a reason why this was such a natural fit, and why on Ethan's side, not asking you to speak for him, but how that connection became Clemson is sniffing around a little bit. Other schools are interested suddenly that Penn State's taken an interest, but he locks in here with the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, speaking of Clemson, I heard there was an offer waiting for him if he visited. He decided to not do that and go to Penn State instead and ended up committing. So that's an interesting data point on that one. But yeah, I mean, I think it's convenient to compare the two, but I think it's also like reassuring for on the Grunkemeyer side that Drew has come in. He seems to have had a good experience with Penn State so far. I think there's trust on both sides. Mike Yurcich trusts Brad in terms of he's not going to send him a dud. He's not going to send him somebody that can't throw the football. And on the other end, it's kind of you have Brad that can trust Mike in terms of taking care of his guys. So I think that's really what goes into it. Again, we're going to see him throw tomorrow at the Elite 11. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where he ranks among his peers, because it's so tough to tell when you're putting out these videos and you're beside the guys that you're training with. Maybe you're just that much better than this guy, but when you're out there throwing against your peers, it might be a different story. The videos, at least this is what Charles Power is relaying, the videos from Under Armour out in Ohio look very good in terms of release, in terms of arm strength, pushing the ball. And we've talked about this on this show before. Arm strength is not just how strong your arm is. It's how you get into your throw. It's how you can push the ball down the field with your body. The one thing that I keep going back to with Grunkemeyer is there's a lot of coordination there, and everything seems to be. It's footwork. It's getting your feet, getting your hips under you when you're scrambling, and he does a lot of scrambling. He does a lot of off balance, off kilter stuff, and really gets the ball into some tight windows. So I think that's what you look at when you can make those Drew comparisons. That's something that Drew did very well as well. So I don't like the player to player comparison, but I think there's a lot of parallels that you can draw here aside from just being an Ohio quarterback.
Please like the video if you're watching here on YouTube, and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated on YouTube so you don't miss any breaking news in this in-depth analysis on Penn State quarterback committing for the class of 2024. A guy that I really like. Fitz, I'll go second here. I want you got a little bit into what you think of him. So I'm going to put up his stats here from last season and tell me just what you think about Ethan from what you've seen on film and what you've gathered.
Well, good stats, 26, 49 on the passing yards, 25 touchdowns. So he's been able to be productive, can run too. Like, I don't think there's any stretch of the imagination that sees this guy as a traditional dual threat guy, but he can run and he can move. I think when you look at his sort of the testing numbers that we have available to us, better shuttle than 40, and I'll take that in a quarterback. That's what I'm looking at is, can he move around in the pocket? Can he change direction? And he does that a lot. Maybe gets a little too creative sometime. Maybe wants to play that loose style of football, which is entertaining. It's fun watching his highlight tape. But there's a lot to like there in terms of athleticism. There's a lot to like in terms of arm strength, pushing the ball down the field. I was struggling to figure out a comp in terms of a Penn State quarterback, because obviously he's not Allar. He's not Bo Prabula. I think he's got a better deep ball than Jackson Smolik, although Smolik was kind of hindered by that collarbone injury. So maybe Sean Clifford in terms of his high school, the way that he looked on the field in high school. But it's tough to come up with a comparison, even though fairly cookie cutter in terms of size, 6'2", 190. There's a lot of guys that are 6'2", 190 throwing the ball around. But yeah, it's tough to come up with a comparison. But he just does a lot of things really well. Interested to see him get stronger. He does have a more of a frame to work with than Van Buren. So there's certainly that positive there. And I think he can still grow. The mechanics are good. You're going to expect that coming from Brad. And you can see in some of these highlights that we're playing, I think he's going to be labeled as a better athlete than you expect.
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of the things you've talked about. I dug into some of his full game highlights, full game film, I should say, in just getting the word out. Maybe this might happen this weekend. The first thing you can see from the highlight film that you see here is the release. Like his arm talent in terms of the quickness of the ball coming out of his hands. He has such a pure stroke where it's like lightning coming out of his hands. He's got lightning quick feet and hips, so he can adjust. RPOs are no problem. Read option is no problem. Throwing on the run here, as you see, he's I think adept at it. If there's one area that I saw on film where it didn't maybe hold up as much was his accuracy, his mobile accuracy. I think there's still a little bit to be developed there in terms of making sure the ball doesn't sail on him when he's thrown to the sideline, and keeping everything on frame. You mentioned this, and this is spot on. It was something that I talked about in his advanced scouting, was when you got a guy that loves to play out of schedule. And this is kind of the modern quarterback that molds themselves after Patrick Mahomes. Is everyone wants to be the Josh Allen, everyone wants to be the Patrick Mahomes, and I see some similarities and some flair there. You got to avoid the big mistakes, and there are times he gets away with missing his second read, breaking the pocket, rolling out, and throwing into what would have been an open window, and he's got a good arm, but you got to do that on time. You can't wait and let the defensive backs converge on the open hole in the zone. And then to me, the biggest thing is big sacks, avoiding those big negative plays. There's a couple of times where he tries to spin out and do those magical things, and then 6'2", 190 did not break as many tackles as 6'5", 220. So that's an area where I think he'll improve.
When he gets in the Big Ten and he gets to scrambling around like that, and somebody smacks him that's 6'6", 265, that'll keep him in the pocket a little bit more. So there's that. Yeah. And I will say this, going off what you said, he's not throwing to wide open receivers on his highlight tape. Like there are windows there that he's hitting, and that's encouraging. There's a couple of times when you're just like, oh, don't throw that, and then all of a sudden the ball gets there. So sometimes it's magic, and you'll take that with a quarterback. But yeah, he's going to have to work through those reads and find those windows, and maybe just pull the trigger a little bit quicker. But the ball gets there, and that's that's a testament to his quick release, testament to that arm strength that we talk about. So there's some times on the film when it gets a little dicey, but the ball does get there, and that's the most important part in the end. So it's a fun watch. I think he's a guy that's got some development left ahead of him, and that's exciting because he's a pretty good athlete as well.
Yeah, not to say this in this way, but like if Ethan Grunkemeyer is the second quarterback in Penn State's class, like if you get a guy like Tyler Cherry, somebody who has a bigger frame and maybe more tools, like you're in a great spot where this should be a lead guy in somebody's class. And if Penn State brings in two of their targets from May, I think there's a lot of talent out there, and Penn State has put themselves in a position to get two really good quarterbacks in this class. One last note I want to make
before you get to that. I think he can be the number one guy in the class. I think he's talented enough, and I don't want people to watch this video and come away thinking that they just settled and took a second guy in this class. I think he can be a number one guy in this class. I think he's going to continue to get stronger. I think he's going to continue to develop under Brad, and I think by the time he gets there, he might be the only guy in this class. And if he does, Penn State will be perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to follow.
I just don't want people twisting your words and saying that they just took a second quarterback and now they're going to focus on taking a first one. So
thank you. And that's not at all what I was trying to say. That like there are a lot of good quarterbacks out there right now, and Penn State has a chance to double dip in talent. And if he is the floor of the class, then this is an incredibly high floor. That this is a guy that's going to start at the Power 5 level. One last thing, because we're going a little bit longer here, as we always do with quarterbacks, but one last thing I want to note, some of the follow-ups to what I said about his offense and what you said about his highlight tape, and there aren't as many open receivers. I don't think his offense overall, I wasn't a huge fan of the scheme, and I think he operated it really well. There's a lot of things in there that Philosophically, maybe I don't agree with, but I don't know that he had the most talented team overall. They went 4-7 last year. So I don't really prescribe to QB wins as a stat because it takes a whole team, right? And I think there's some nuance there. When we dive into T. Frank's film room and we get into all that stuff, I just want to make those notes that it's all about the environment as well. And I think he elevated the environment around him at Olentangy, but it was not the best of the environments he could have faced. And he faced a lot of good teams in Ohio. So there's a lot of nuance there. But for Ethan Grunkemeyer, it does sound like I'm saying like,
there's a lot of things that are going to be thrown back on you, just so you're aware of this video. So if you've made it this far, then it's at Thomas Frank Carr. Yeah. Okay. Very good.
So you want to know how I really feel about him? Check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com because I've written glowingly about this kid.
That's the funny thing is you've been very high on him for a while now, and it's delivery is important. Your release is not as quick this Saturday morning.
Well, so the problem is, like, I just spent all morning watching his full game film. So you watch the highlight and then you watch the full game and you're like, okay, let's put some stuff into context. Let's add the details, the relief, the trees in the background. And then it comes out as kind of this muted of, he's good here, the things to work on, but really like his tools and everything he's got to work with, I think he's got some special qualities, and I'm very excited to watch him develop as a quarterback. So I'm glad in that aspect that he committed to Penn State because I want to watch this story and I want to watch him develop. I just want to I always get in my own way of painting the whole picture, and people just kind of want the broad strokes.
And we will see him tomorrow at the Elite 11 in State College. Looking forward to that. I know you'll be there. I'll be there. Ryan Snyder will be there. A lot of quarterbacks coming into town, a lot of other prospects coming into town. Check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for more on terms of visitors, in terms of guys that are just going to, pop over, check out Penn State, see the coaches and things like that. Some good names in town this weekend. So check that out.
You killed it on the outro. So all I'm going to say is subscribe. Make sure you don't miss the next breaking news from Penn State football and Blue White Illustrated.